three sermons on the sources of faith, but I need to say first what that word means to me, faith. And last week I put this definition up. I actually found it in Merriam-Webster's dictionary. And the first one surprised me. It's allegiance or a promise. It's loyalty. It's making a commitment, sincerity of intention. And yet it's that second definition that we seem to focus on when we talk about faith. It's what I believe. A loyalty to a doctrine. A loyalty to a particular way of thinking. And as I think about those two definitions, it's clear the first one is my preference. And so I want to talk a little bit about what we call the source of faith, which is the world religions and our own Judeo-Christian tradition. And I say that our own because that's where this congregation and our faith grew out. And it's still part of it in some wonderful, changing ways. I put a quote last week up on the screen by William James, which says, in essence, you can read it, but it says, in essence, that what faith is really about an affirmation of life, of not destroying life, your life or anyone else's, but a faith that we can live and always affirm life, and that's not easy sometimes. So I want to talk about three people that happen to be men. They are three people that I've encountered in the study of world religions, which is one of our sources. And as Unitarian Universalists, we have a long tradition of looking at other sources. We can quickly point to our founding mothers and fathers who looked at religions of the world as something new. They were just arriving when the transcendentalists in the 1800s began to shape our faith. The first one, I'll talk about last, Jalaluddin Rumi, the poet, the Sufi master, the teacher, the lover, the best-selling author in the world in the past decade or so. Another one is Swami Vivekananda. I encountered him as a study of world religious figures. And I wrote a paper in 1967 about it. So I want to share a little bit of what I discovered when I look back at that paper that was written long ago. And Thich Nhat Hanh, the Buddhist monk, Vietnamese Buddhist monk, who became a clarion for peace in that war. There's some interesting similarities between Thich Nhat Hanh and Swami Vivekananda that I want to share, and then a difference with Jalaluddin Rumi. Swami Vivekananda was born in 1863 in India. He was bright, precocious. He had a mind that seemed to just want to absorb everything. The science of the West had arrived in India, and he studied it. He was fascinated with languages. He was fascinated with one of his teachers, Ramakrishna. And Ramakrishna was uneducated. And yet he was pulling India back to its own source, because by then, as you might know, India had been under the thumb or the rule or the benevolence of the British Empire. And there was all sorts of turmoil. And Vivekananda saw two things. He saw the great poverty in his country, and he saw the beauty and power of his Hindu religious tradition. And he became aware that in 1893 there was going to be a gathering in Chicago in the United States. And so he found ways and resources to bring himself here. And when he got there, something miraculous happened. Everyone else was speaking about their God. People from all over the world. And Swami Vivekananda took his place by speaking about our God, about humankind's encounter with the eternal. And he turned, in many ways, that parliament of religions on its head, because he was able to come with a different message that woke people up. Many resented what he had to say, but as I look back on what I wrote about him, I was struck how even back then I was hungering for this awareness that he had spoken about that came from Hinduism, an awareness of the unity. And then I discovered that there were Unitarian Universalists who helped put together that conference. And I want to share just a little piece of what the Swami said to this conference. Unity in variety is the plan of nature, and the Hindu has recognized it. Every other religion lays down certain fixed dogmas and tries to force society to adapt to them. It places before society only one coat, and it's supposed to fit everyone. The Hindu has discovered that the absolute can only be realized or thought of or stated through the relative. And the images, crosses, crescents are simply so many symbols, so many pegs to hang spiritual ideals on. When I discovered Unitarian Universalism 10 years later, I discovered that Jacob Lloyd Jones was a minister in Chicago and helped to put together that Parliament of Religion. I was moved also by what the Swami was trying to do. He was trying to do two things. He was bringing his message of Hinduism and its unity to the world, but he was also trying to gather resources to help the poor and the famished in India. That was his struggle, all of his life. He wanted to go back and to unite in a spiritual way with the unity, with the Brahma, but he always had this tension that he had to help. He had to help. Thich Nhat Hanh had that same tension. Thich Nhat Hanh, Vietnamese Buddhist, was a young man. He saw the suffering that another imperial force was wreaking on his country, on Vietnam. And he saw that and he said, I must do something. So he created a school of social work, which was reacted to by the Buddhist hierarchy with great disdain and anger. That you should want to help, just do help. Just train social workers to find ways to help people. Was not the way you were going to accommodate the great imperialist power. It was not the way, the Buddhist way, they said. Thich Nhat Hanh became, in our time, a modern-day sage recognized by people of many different faiths. But it was that origin that struck me when I first learned of him. And it was long after I had become a peace activist and professionally involved against the war in Vietnam. It was long after that period that I discovered the beauty, but the challenge that he was putting forth of holding together the need to do something to make the world better, and yet this longing to be in one. The Buddhists have a tradition, the Bodhisattva, who attains enlightenment, but then comes back to help everyone else. that tension, for me, is a learning from world religions that I can't seem to shake, but challenges me again and again. Then comes Rumi. Rumi, the lover. I don't find that challenge of whether to save or savor, whether to be involved in the world politically and actively, or whether to be at peace and one with the source. With Rumi, I find nothing but love. He says, the intellect is always showing off, the lover is always getting lost, the intellect is afraid of drowning in the sea, and the lover, well, that's what he's supposed to do. Drown in the sea. Dance, the whirling dance, as you know. One arm toward heaven, one arm toward the earth. Whirling, whirling in ecstasy. Rumi says, the light looks different on that wall than it does on this wall, but it's the same light. And then we borrow these clothes, these time personalities from the light. And when we praise, when we come together in worship, we pour them back in. What a beautiful image. Not unlike the Swamis, not unlike the monks. But a challenge. How to really be in love with life, day in and day out. So that is what we're about. His lover. Shams of to breathe. Mystical encounter with God, some would say. But he disappears from his teaching role and goes off and gets lost with this wonderful image of a person who is so filled with the love of life that he draws Rumi out into some new place, putting aside all of his books, all of his learning, to say, this is what it's about. This is what it's about. Those are the sources that you can encounter when you look openly at the world's religions. Now there's a danger that you can take it on. I am not a Hindu. I am not a Buddhist. I am not a Sufi. I have a different identity. And it's important to me. But it's important to me that I honor the differences. And my worldview is different than those that I mentioned. But they each challenge me, I believe, and call me to a new and different place. If I just let it open. If I take the time to go deeper. Read another book by Thich Nhat Hanh. Read another poem by Rumi. Listen more deeply to the Swami. And then I feel like I have a glimpse, not only a glimpse, of the truth that they have that can awaken the truth that's in me. I want to talk in just a moment about our Judeo-Christian tradition. It's a lot to cover, but I want to hold these elements from the world religion in some kind of a creative tension with our own tradition. And to do that, let us sing a song first. Oh, come on. Praise. 2:15 in your hymnal. If you like the notes along with the music, please rise at the table. But in our tradition, that song resounded strongly in this sanctuary, I am sure. We sing it from time to time. The challenge of Christianity and Judaism to Unitarian Universalists is great. And I say that knowing that there is such baggage that comes from those traditions. And yet there is such treasure and such beauty there that calls us. And yet we get lost in the words. We read ahead in the hymns to see if we can sing them. We do all manner of things that treat it as something different than we might when we pick up Rumi or a Hindu Gita or a Buddhist sutra. We treat it differently. We are almost allergic to it sometimes. And that's a shame. That is a shame from my perspective. Because the more I go deep into any one of these religions, the more I find something new that challenges me, that excites me. Now, you can look at that picture above. I just pulled off one from some source, Christian source. The Exodus. There's Moses parting the water. Now, you can worry about whether he did that or whether the Red Sea was really not the Red Sea or was a swamp. You can go through that in some kind of intellectual way. But the fact of the matter is that word Exodus means something. And it has meant something to everyone can relate to that. What are you captured by? What are you captive to? What is the bondage you need to break? Or the country or the society you live in needs to break in order for people to be free, to explore the beauty of their life? Is it slavery? That fit big for those who founded this church in 1847. They were the ones, the radical abolitionists, who said, that is not the way it should be. We need to exit that. And that's what they preached. And that's what built this congregation. That's a theme and a motif that I'm not willing to give up. For even my most wonderful ideas of unity, that is a prophetic message. Covenant and community come out of our Judeo-Christian tradition. That we agree freely as individuals to covenant and make promises, just like God made to us in the wilderness. No, we want to argue about who God was? I don't think so. It's the promise. It's the relationship that I have between me and you that is important. There's a set of commandments that I'm going to make. And I'll make them. And that's what we're going to live on. And we're going to agree to that mutually. That's what a covenant's about. God agrees to work with humans, and humans agree to work with God. That's what that's about. It's an awesome promise. It's a powerful. And then from the Christian tradition, love and selfless. That's also the Jewish tradition, love and the selfless service to others. Universalists were the ones that pulled that out in our faith. They said, I don't care what your intellectual arguments might be, but my God is a God of love. And that God of love, their first argument was, is not going to condemn anybody to hell for eternity. You know, then they had some second thoughts, and the restorationists moved up, and they said, well, maybe just a little bit. And so they had this little argument, but their bottom line was, God is love. And the only way to do it, to actualize that, is to be in relationship with one another, to care about each other. These traditions are rich because they can speak to us today, if we let them. If we let them in. If we take the time to sit like Thich Nhat Hanh, or maybe to feel compelled to be an emissary like Swami Vivekananda. Maybe. These are our sources. There are others we'll talk about next week. But these sources are so important because they have the capability to open us up. Not to be afraid of what Swami Vivekananda's teacher, Ramakrishna, had this encounter with Kali, the Mother God. A personal encounter. Wouldn't that be wonderful? That we could articulate or feel a personal encounter with the source of our being. Not the language I choose, but I don't know what language to choose with that. So I like Emerson. I like Thoreau, Margaret Fuller, the Transcendentalists, who say, just look around. Wake up. There it is. I'm going to go to the woods for a couple years, watch the ants, and be in awe. Whatever it takes. And sometimes, with all the examples I've given, sometimes it takes walking away and finding that solitude, that self that can become selfless, and then re-entering and saying, how can I be of use? It's that simple. Blessed.